And I have a 10 and a half and a 9-year-old and a 16-month-old, and was a surrogate twice. So I had twins for one family and then donated one of my embryos to another family. But my 10 and a half and 9-year-old really love to play together, and they can play for hours together. And, families always comment on how like respectful they are and how compassionate they are with each other and how while they listen. And I'm not saying this to toot my own horn. I'm saying this because while I don't believe in helicopter parenting, and it's not really about not believing, I think everyone can parent however they prefer. Um, I definitely think like giving children space to like explore and take risks and all of that, right? Which is kind of a different style of parenting than helicopter parenting. I'm kind of like free range parenting. However, my listening is always attuned to everything that they're saying and how they're playing. And some people are like, oh, kids need to work it out and just fight it out and whatever it is, to navigate social situations. And I actually find that that creates a pecking order and makes it really hard for children to understand how to effectively interact socially. And that by my attunement and guiding moment by moment to where I'm like, oh, Hayden, try again, please. Or, Hazel, please acknowledge Hayden. He's, he's trying to get your attention. Or, you know, um, my son Hayden has a bit of a stutter, and so it's very grounding for him when he's trying to say Hazel, 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 Hazel to get a thought out because he's just getting so excited and he's just kind of hung up on that. To have him say, Hayden, say, excuse me, please, Hazel. And then he'll take a breath and say, excuse me, please, Hazel. And it always kind of resets him and makes it so that he can then get his thought out all in one breath, as opposed to just kind of getting hung up on the excitement. And so guiding them to communicate compassionately, to be responsive to each other, not reactive. Anytime I hear the play get too dramatic, I help them to be aware of that. I'm like, try again, please. We don't need to play, we don't need the characters to think in a problem. We don't need, the play to be so dramatic, right? They get that from shows and books and observing other people. And while we lit their tech time, and I am cognizant of like them watching approved shows or doing approved educational apps, it still is just out there in the ether that they tend to soak up, and the mannerisms and the conversations and the role play. And so I'm constantly um, attuning to their conversations and guiding them to make sure that they're respecting and honoring each other, and that they're taking turns, and that that I'm essentially preserving their sibling bond by always holding boundaries for them to communicate effectively, interact respectfully, be honoring and loving with themselves, with each other, with their play, hold boundaries for themselves and for each other. And it's like, because of that, it's created just a good rapport for them, but it's also like, this is just how life is. It's not any other way. There isn't fighting, there isn't bickering. We don't hold space for that. And it doesn't mean that, there might be moments where they get overwhelmed or frustrated with each other and they're not accessing their capacity to communicate effectively. But then I run interference for that, and I jump in and I navigate and guide it. And, I don't solve it for them, but I empower them to solve it constructively with each other. And I just think that it's a style that works for me. If the result is, after 5 years of this kind of running social, interaction and guiding them in this kind of way, it means they can play for hours together, and I get positive feedback from every store we go to. This is a very effective way to guide children. And when I'm running the Montessori preschools with 36 kids, and I'm like, try again, please, Max, let's have a response. Let's think in a solution, Zoe, and I'm like, just giving them these prompts of think in a solution, let's be trusting, try again, ask for support. That's a nice problem. What's your solution going to be, right? If it's that simple, like I said, black and white, then it can make the classroom management so much more straightforward. It can allow everyone to almost more easily self-correct. I remember growing up as a ballet dancer, and my instructor would be like, shoulders back, sit up tall, point your toe, tuck in your tummy, like all the things. After a few classes, you start to self-correct, and I'm like listening to everyone else's correction and integrating that as if it was for myself. And I have found that when there's this empowered, respectful, supportive communication where everyone is, being responsible and accountable for their results, for their interpretation, their experience of, and their outlook on life, and they're all having this like compassion and respect and community agreements of like honoring space and respecting turn taking and asking for support and using time timers to take turns, and asking for support from a teacher when the child isn't, when they're not able to work it out. And it creates such a functional community. And I just think about what could be the impact of offering this type of self-regulation through co-regulation, right? Because that's ultimately what this is a lot of co-regulation. And it's not to control what anybody says or does. But if we think about, a child is going to absorb and soak in the mannerisms and they're going to model that, and they're going to either have those skills or they're not going to have those skills. Either time's going to pass, and the way they think that's effective to communicate is by cursing and hitting and snatching and teasing and bullying and all kinds of things that are just like feeding and fueling the inner ego versus like really keeping that channeled and balanced and grounded, and teaching that the effective way to communicate is in these responses and the collaboration and the trust and the, asking for support. And also too, it's another side to this is like not always identifying like, oh, you ate your vegetables and, oh, that's going to help you be so healthy someday. And oh, you did this and you did that. So we don't do star charts. We don't do, um, praise that is almost surface level. Like we're looking for depth. I want them to tell themselves to have healthy underlying conversations. Like if we're all going to have a peanut gallery by the time we're adults, let's let the self-talk be positive and not negative. Let's let the peanut gallery be empowering and supportive and, not like punitive and degrading. So it's like every day we talk about, oh, what did you do today to choose to be healthy? What did you do today to choose to be a contribution? Or wow, I noticed that you were thinking in a solution when you did this. And I noticed that you were asking for support when this happened. And I'm really grateful that you were willing to be a team player when this happened. So you can use like the depth, the way of being. This is something I do at Infinite Connection Academy and through my nonprofit, Pili Paole. We teach ways of being. We don't focus on what they're doing. We focus on the ways of being. And it goes so deep, and it really creates an internal moral compass that's coming from virtue signaling, and it's coming from like a really positive place of yeah, just being aware of how they're showing up and how people are perceiving them. And a lot of times adults who are in therapy or going through life skills training are learning these things in their 20s, 30s, 40s, like reactively and, in therapy to try and fix all of these dynamics. But the way that my brain is wired is it takes those types of classes and then puts it through proactively as what is the life skill you can teach a child from, age 12 to 15 months on up? What is the way that you can guide a parent to interact with a baby from birth to 12 to 15 months before that you can directly teach the child these skills? How can you indirectly interact with the child so that you're reparenting yourself, you're more effectively parenting the child, your communication is getting enhanced. The child is, the baby is learning to trust and love their sleep space. The baby doesn't need to cry as much because they're trusting you'll respond to them and not react at them. The baby, the toddler, is learning how to self-regulate through co-regulation.